Hi everybody, on today's RO360 episode, join us as we examine and analyze our trail cam intel data from our off-grid Vantaggi Deer Camp in northern Wisconsin. As I said in our first episode of RO360 Season 3, 2020 was a year like no other.
Our visits to the northern Wisconsin off-grid Vantaggi Deer Camp was limited during this unusually extraordinary year. Early season access was non-existent due to COVID-related shutdowns and closures. And other than a trip in early August to cut grass and pull the trail cams, the RO360 crew's opportunities to make our usual trips to the Vantaggi camp in 2020 were curtailed because of the other delayed responsibilities on our central Wisconsin hunting camp and northern Wisconsin fishing lake cabin. But even at those places, we found ourselves to be behind our normal seasonal routines, just reinforcing how 2020 was a year like no other.
And now that the trapper's cabin at the Vantaggi Deer Camp in northern Wisconsin has been restored to a fully functional and livable cabin, thanks to the hard work and efforts of the RO360 crew the last couple of seasons, we can now concentrate on land management and what we need to do to make this a viable hunting camp from year to year. So year 2 of our Intel Trail Cam gathering will allow us to continue to learn how to become better stewards of the land.
The trail cams had been set in late October of 2019 as we continued to monitor the acreage to determine what type of wildlife we would encounter, the density of the populations, travel patterns, and other tendencies. One of our biggest concerns was the predators, the bears, cougars, bobcats, coyotes, and wolves, and what effect they would have on the deer populations on the land.
But even with our limited trail cam data that was available to us, as we only had active cameras from late October of 2019 through early August of 2020, those 9 months provided some valuable data for us that will allow us to continue forward to review our strategy and tactics for management of this land. So come on along and join us and follow along as we review our 2020 trail cam intel data.
Now, we only had one trail cam active during the October 2019 to August 2020 timeframe. This cam was set up just west of the trapper's cabin, around 75 to 100 yards on a trail through some wooded area with pine trees. We wanted to see what was still using this trail close to the cabin over the winter. Our plan was to add more trail cams in early spring to monitor additional areas of the property. But as I said, 2020 was a year like no other. But even this limited single trail cam info would be helpful to add to last year's database as we begin to build our knowledge of the property. So let's check out these trail cam pictures. The activity on this trail was slow starting and all nocturnal as the 2019 bow, then rifle season got underway. The first picture on 10/31 at 11:47 p.m. shows a doe walking the cut trail heading north. Then no activity for 4 days until 11:05 at 7:06 p.m. when a large body doe is heading south on the trail. On 11/9, after another 4-day lull, finally a wide rack 6-pointer shows itself moving south on the trail at 1:07 a.m. He pauses as something makes him turn off the trail, now heading in a southeast direction. Just 7 minutes later, trailing the wide 6-pointer at 1:14 a.m., a spike buck is heading south on the trail. Now something strange is going on here because just 1 minute later, This spiked buck has turned around and is heading back north on the trail in the direction he just came from. Plus, the 6-pointer just a little while ago turned off the trail. Neither one of these bucks wants to continue south on this trail. What could be going on? Did they both sense a predator? Like a bear or a wolf that we know are in the area? I guess we'll never know, as no further trail cam intel showed up after the spiked buck. One day later, on 11/10, daylight activity resumes, as a couple of doe show themselves in a series of 5 pictures at midday around 12:24 to 12:25 p.m. Then, 3 days later on 11/13, as the bucks return on the trail cam, we go nocturnal again at 4:54 a.m. as what appears to be a different spiked buck shows up heading north on the trail. Then, 2 days later on 11:15 at 4:02 a.m., a tall-tined what appears to be an 8-pointer. It's hard to tell for sure because this buck turns its head towards the trail cam just as the picture went off, causing the blur. Either way, the RO360 crew agrees this buck makes our hit list. We'll be watching for him for sure. Unfortunately, trail activity was non-existent for the rest of November. Don't know why. Hunting pressure, predators, or weather. Something had the deer shutting down their movement. Finally, on 12/2, our trail cam went off showing a heavy snowfall that had occurred. This may have slowed down deer movement recently, but not for 17 to 18 days. Some other event was going on prior to this snowfall. Nocturnal activity finally resumes on 12/7 at 5:16 a.m. as this doe is knee-deep in snow with her nose to the ground, foraging for some food. The last trail cam picture of 2019 occurs just before Christmas on 12/22, as this doe is out for a daylight romp in the deep snow, coming through midday at 12:48 p.m. In the first months of 2020, trail cam activity is sparse on this trail. On 1/7 at 2:05 p.m., deep snow, as you can see, is affecting the deer movement and travel routes. This series of pictures from early February on the 10th during the late afternoon still shows deep snow obstructing the unrestricted movement of the deer in the area. By the time March rolled around, temps had dropped to well below freezing, allowing the uppermost layer of snow to freeze and crust over, thus allowing the deer to walk freely on top without breaking through. I would have expected more movement and more trail cam pictures, but these were the only photos on this trail for the month of March. Clearly, the deer movement had changed from this trail area. Early April brought about warmer temperatures with melting snow starting to open up bare ground. The deer activity intensified as foraging for a more available food source becomes a primary focus for the deer. Clearly, this trail is starting to become an area of active foraging. As more and more deer are starting to show up, they're starting to appear in larger groups. And with more and more deer coming into close quarters, well, some tempers are bound to clash at times. Then, at the end of April, on the 27th, even though there has been steady daylight activity for the whole month, something changes and the deer take to the cover of darkness on this trail for the day. Just one daylight picture late afternoon at 3:58 p.m. Then, nocturnal activity on a high alert status from 9:12 p.m. through 10:04 p.m. For 3 days, nothing shows up on the trail cam. Then the deer return in large numbers to resume daylight foraging for food. May started out with our first confirmed buck visit. He was checking out an old mineral lick site. Check out this last close-up. Within a minute of our first buck moving off, this doe came walking through heading south. Then about 2.5 hours later, that first confirmed buck came working his way back north through the trail. We had no trail activity for about a day and a half until this doe worked its way through on 5/6 around 10:30 a.m. Then it wasn't until later, around 5:30 p.m. on the 6th, that what appears to be a small buck in the foreground and our first confirmed buck from a few days ago make an appearance. As our first confirmed buck moves off, within 2 minutes, a larger doe is in checking out the old mineral lick area. After no trail cam activity for 3 days, this group of does comes through on 5/9 late afternoon at 5:17 p.m. About 28 hours later, on 5/11 at 9:22 p.m., we have our first black bear trail cam photos. This guy or gal had an uncontrollable itch, and he or she, well, it's hard to tell for sure, appears to try everything to make it go away. After the black bear came through, there was no trail cam activity on this trail area until the next morning, about 9.5 hours later, around 7 a.m., when this buck works his way through. Over the next 7 days, there was plenty of deer activity on this trail, mostly does and sometimes in large quantity, but there were also a few identifiable bucks that came through. And then, just 8 days after our first encounter, On the 19th of May, early in the afternoon, another black bear appearance on our trail cam. Now, deer activity didn't resume in the area until the following morning at 7:14 a.m. with one lone doe. In general, activity was slow for the next week or so after that black bear came through. It gradually started to pick up with a buck or two coming through on the 25th and the 27th. And by the 28th, the deer started to return to the same activity pattern before the bear came by, and the buck activity had steadily increased. The month of June started out with a couple of nice-sized does on this trail checking out the old mineral lick site. The next day started out with some early morning nocturnal activity around 2 a.m. by, as best as we can tell, some does. But by sunrise, we had a buck moving through the trail area. After this doe moved through midday, we had no activity for around 22 hours when nocturnal movement took over from June 3rd through June 5th. Then a resumption of daylight activity beginning at 5:56 a.m. on 6/5 as the buck started to roam through the trail area for the next couple of days. Then, on June 7th, this doe took to nocturnal movement again around 3 a.m. to check out the old mineral lick area. The next day, on the 8th of June, saw a return to daylight activity as these nice-sized does moved through the area. There's no activity for 4 days in the area until this nocturnal buck shows up on the 12th at 10:04 p.m. Another 7 days passes with nothing in the trail area until this deer moves through on the 19th at 12:07 a.m. 2 more days pass by before a single deer passes through on the morning of the 21st of June. Something's up, as the deer activity has virtually stopped over the last 13 days, almost 2 full weeks. There's only been 1 buck and 2 does come through the area. Then, about 22 hours later, on the evening of 6/22 at 7:26 p.m., a possible explanation for the reduction in the deer activity in this area, as we have another trail cam appearance from a black bear checking out the old mineral lick site. As we zoom in, you can see that this is a huge one, possibly in the 300-pound range. Finally, about 28 hours later on 6/23, around 11:52 p.m., we have a persistent doe checking out the old mineral site. That is until a skunk catches her eye, or she catches its scent, and proceeds to follow it off trail in a northwest direction. The June trail cam action finishes out 7 days later on the 30th with this large doe coming through the area. Something was still amiss in this area as July started off slow. Our first trail cam picture came on the 9th under the cover of darkness around 10 p.m. with this doe. Then about 20 minutes later, a second doe showed up on high alert.
Well, the deer activity has had an unusual pattern since June 8th. In the last month, there have been 22 days without any sort of trail cam activity. Now, the trail cam activity downtime has gone from a span of just a single day to the longest span of 9 days without any activity. And twice we had spans of 7 days without any activity. Now, we did have 3 black bear encounters on our trail cam since the beginning of May. And the latest here in June, this black bear was huge. We're estimating that one in the 300-pound range. So my guess is we have bear activity or wolf activity in this general area over the last month, which is drastically affecting the deer movement and patterns. And sure enough, one day after the nocturnal deer movement where they were on high alert, look what shows up on our trail cameras.
This is the 4th appearance of a black bear on this camera since May. In the span of approximately 60 calendar days, we've had 4 black bear encounters. Upon a closer look at this bear, it's definitely not the same bear as the June 22nd bear, although this bear is also very big. You'll notice that the coat from the center to back on the camera side has plenty of fur. The previous bear 18 days ago had patches of missing fur, as you can see in this recapped photo. As far as we can tell, we have 3 different black bears on camera, and a possibility of 4 different bears based on these photos. Another 6 days pass without any trail activities. Finally, on 7/16 at 9:13 p.m., we have what appears to be a doe pass through the area. 3 more days pass by, taking us to the evening of July 19th at 7:47 p.m. before we have a couple of deer, both of them does, pass through this trail cam area. Again, another 3 days pass without any trail cam activity, until on July 22nd at 4:57 p.m. when what appears to be a 10-point in velvet works the area back and forth. On July 24th, we get multiple deer coming through, with one of them being a spike buck. Then on July 27th, 28th, and 29th, we get nocturnal activity from what appears to be all does. As July is drawing to a close, on the 30th at 9:52 a.m., a nice velvet 8-point walks in front of our trail cam. Then, as July ends and August begins, we go all nocturnal activity. From August 2nd through August 5th, 100% daylight activity resumes. And with our last trail cam pic on August 5th, with what appears to be a button buck. By August 8th, my brother-in-law Craig is cutting grass around camp and cutting open some of the trails. Also pulling our trail cam as our data collection ends at the Vantaggi Deer Camp for 2020.
Well, we saw all the pictures that this trail cam took from the end of October to the beginning of August. So now let's take a look at gathering all the data that this trail cam provided us. Your trail cam is providing you a lot more information than just pictures. You have to data mine your trail cam pictures because it's just not showing a picture, a timestamp, a day, a moon phase, temperature, etc. Gather all the data you can from your trail cam intel to become a better hunter and a more proficient one. So now some of the intel data mining that you can do from your trail cam is you can watch, are the same deer hanging around? Are they part of a home range in this area? Or are they just moving through? You see them once and not again, in which case they're moving through the area. And then you will group that with additional data from trail cams in other areas on your property to see if they're still in a home range on your property, just not in this specific area. What is your doe to buck ratio on your property? There's countless of data points that are available. All you got to do is take the time to put it all together, make yourself a more proficient and better hunter, and learn how to manage your land better. So the first thing you do is start by creating some simple graphs so you can see the whole picture of what info and tendencies that your trail cam info is providing for you. Now I'm going to walk you through what type of graphing I set up for this single trail cam. Now I'm kind of old school. I still do my graphing with paper and pen. Now some of you are probably a little more proficient with computers and will be able to compile some type of a program so that when you enter this data, the program will end up saving you a lot of time in compiling and giving you the statistical information to make you a better hunter and more proficient at chasing those whitetail.
What I did here to start out was to graph how many does, how many bucks, the rack size of the bucks, the date, the time, and trail cam location. Once that was done by going over each trail cam picture, I could take the data and calculate the doe to buck ratio in this area. For instance, in approximately 9 months on this camera, from 10/31/19 through 8/5/20, there were 138 deer captured on the camera. Of those, 111 were does, or 80.4%, and 27 were bucks, or 19.6%. So my doe to buck ratio between 10/31/19 through 8/5/20 in this area was 4.1 does to each buck. This, coupled with the other trail cams on the property, would give me a good overall idea of my deer population and my doe to buck ratio for the entire property. Also, based on rack size info, it was determined that out of the 27 bucks on camera, 4 bucks were 6-point or better, or 14.8% of the bucks here between late October and early August were possible shooters.
Now some of the other intel data that I compiled was all deer activity during daylight, dusk, and evening hours. Now I broke up the 24-hour time period into 4 separate time periods.
Period 1 is 6 a.m. through 10:59 a.m., early daylight time period. Period 2 is 11 a.m. through 2:59 p.m., which is the afternoon daylight period. Period 3 is 3 p.m. through 7:59 p.m., which is the dusk time period. And period 4 is 8 p.m. through 5:59 a.m. the next morning, which is the evening time period. Daytime appearances occurred at 40.6% of the time. Dusk appearances occurred 19.5% of the time, and evening appearances were at 39.8% of the time. So 60.1% of all deer appearances in this trail cam area from 10/31/19 through 8/5/20 would have been during possible shooting hours if this data was accumulated strictly during hunting season.
Next, let's review the deer activity data intel by time periods.
In period 1, the early daylight hours, it had 22 deer, or 17.2% of all deer, 11 were bucks and 11 were does for an even 50-50 split. In period 2, the afternoon daylight, it had 30 deer, or 23.4% of all deer. 2 were bucks and 28 were doe, or 6.7% bucks and 93.3% does. For period 3, which was the dusk period, it had 25 deer, or 19.5% of all deer. 3 were bucks and 22 were doe, or 12% bucks and 88% doe. And finally, period 4, the evening period, it had 51 deer, or 39.8% of all deer. 8 were bucks, 43 were doe, or 15.7% bucks and 84.3% doe. The mine data intel shows that the most bucks appeared during time period 1. Now, time period 2 had more deer activity, but only 2 bucks showed up. The same thing with time period 3. Again, more total deer activity, but only 3 bucks showed up. So let's delve into the data mining activity for bucks a little bit further. Let's take a look at what we data mined as far as rack sizes on the bucks. As you can see, younger bucks, 2-pointers and 4-pointers, make up the large percentage at 84% of all bucks, while shooter bucks, that being 6-point through 10-point, are only at 16%. Well, this data set tells me that we should have a pretty good class of bucks coming up in the next year or two. Now, what this also tells me is that I probably should spend a greater percentage of my time hunting bucks down in our central Wisconsin property rather than at the Vantaggi Deer Camp. But if I do come up here to hunt, I should concentrate on time period 1, because that's when of the deer that showed themselves in time period 1, 50% of the deer were bucks. Some other interesting data points I mined from this trail cam data was that all buck activity had a 66.7% probability of being during possible shooting hours. Again, shooting hours if this data was accumulated strictly during the hunting season. Also, the largest bucks in 8-point and 10-point made appearances during possible shooting hours. The 8-point at 9:52 a.m. and the 10-point at 4:57 p.m. One last interesting buck intel data that I'll address is that from October 31st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019, which was the hunting season that this camera was active, only 11 deer showed up on the trail cam, 4 bucks and 7 doe, or 36.4% bucks and 63.6% doe. But daylight and dusk activity was at 45.5% of the time compared to 54.5% during the evening hours. But during this hunting period time frame, all 4 bucks that showed up, the 2 2-pointers, the 6-point, and the 8-point, all came through during non-shooting hours during the evening time period. Now, what does that tell me? Well, 45.5% activity during daylight hours is pretty good. Tells me that there's a pretty good chance that I can get some meat in the freezer. But if I'm looking to hunt one of those big bucks, chances are it's not going to happen.
Now, just for the heck of it, because of the 4 bear encounters that we had, I wanted to data mine some deer movement intel from the trail cams for the 5 days before the black bear showed up on camera and the 5 days after the black bear showed up on camera.
On the first black bear encounter, you can see at first the deer activity was plentiful both before and after the bear showed up on the trail cam. On the second black bear encounter, the activity level remained the same prior to the bear appearing, but the 5-day period after saw a drastic decline in deer activity in the area. By the time the third black bear encounter happened, the activity level both before and after was drastically reduced. And by the fourth black bear encounter, the before activity level was still greatly reduced, and the after activity level was non-existent in the 5 days following the bear encounter. The deer's learning curve took a little bit, but they certainly were starting to learn.
Now, these are just a few examples of the data mining that you can glean from your trail cameras. There's many more data points available to you and may be specific to the area where you hunt. Now, the whole idea here is to spend the time, gather that data from your trail cams, and put those percentages in your favor to be at the right place at the right time. Well, I hope we gave you some useful ideas by utilizing the hidden data available on your trail cam through graphing tendencies. Hopefully this makes you a better, more proficient whitetail hunter. Hey, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos and my channel. A big thank you for that. Now feel free to comment below, or if you don't want your comments available in the public eye, we can also be reached at rapantoutdoors360@gmail.com. And if you know a friend you think may enjoy this video series, please feel free to share this with him or share our link. And always, whether you fish or hunt, make sure you practice CCR. Catch, conserve, replenish. Make sure that there are resources available for future generations. We'll see you all next time.